Bob Thompson, retired president, Fox Sports Networks, Big Ten Network co-founder. Of course, he's a consultant, also Thompson Sports Group, joins us on 365 Sports. And Bob, there really hasn't been much change other than perhaps chatter, some quotes or whatever else. Are you surprised, or if I would have asked you this maybe a year ago, would the Pac-12 be in this position closing out March? Would you have been surprised if that was the case?
Well, first of all, gentlemen, it's always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
As far as would they be in this place, if you'd asked me a year ago, I would say no. But I also think kind of now that they're in this place, it's like, okay, so what's the hurry now?
Mm-hmm.
They're the only ones out there doing a deal. And it appears, at least based on certain presidents who are making comments, everybody's going to stick around and see at least what that deal is. So if I'm the commissioner and his consultant, I'm making sure it's the best possible deal I can get to show to these presidents so that they'll absolutely stay. But to jump now, while it might set off a series of domino effects around the country, I don't see why you do it. If you've waited this long, you might as well wait and see the deal.
Bob, with so many companies having layoffs and budget cuts and, Bob Iger saying, look, they got to really look at what they spend money on. Is this just the worst time to be negotiating a big money rights deal because of those things?
Well, it certainly doesn't help, but you also have to think that this deal doesn't even start for 18 months, and things could be, significantly different in 18 months. But having the economic issues hanging over your head and having to be probably a little more selective in what product you ultimately purchase, certainly it makes it difficult for the companies selling rights unless you're, say, the NFL.
Bob, how complex do you think this is behind the scenes in terms of, obviously we don't know who all's involved to the fullest extent. We just know what's kind of been reported out there and who may or may not be, interested to what levels. But how complicated does this get when you're dealing with multiple different companies potentially?
It's certainly more companies adds to the complexity, and new companies who may not have had history in collegiate sports broadcasting complicates it even further. There's a variety of things that have to be resolved that are interrelated, selection process being the primary, and then just getting to an actual contract, especially for the folks that haven't had one before. It's a different animal. It's different than a professional contract. And it's got a lot of intricacies that have to be worked through. And so I can see how that would take time, longer than if, say, it was just a renewal with ESPN and Fox.
What were your thoughts, President Robbins in Arizona making the comments? And he's like, listen, we're in this, but we still need the numbers. And I think that's kind of just smart, and that's what everyone should think. But he mentioned something about April the 15th. And you just mentioned a minute ago, if you haven't gotten it done by now, what is the rush? Would there be a timeline, even if it's 18 or 24 months down the road for you? Is there a date that you think that there needs to be at least some sunshine?
I would think, certainly in the next month and a half at the max. You also have to take into consideration if you're talking about Arizona or Arizona State, Colorado, Utah, any of the schools, one of the likely spots would probably be the Big 12. Well, their deal doesn't start for another year and a half or 2.5 years, I believe. So it's not a real hurry. Whoever, if you commit, you're still committed. If you commit somewhere else, you're still committed to the Pac-12 for the next 18 months because that's when your deal doesn't expire till then. So your grant rights go through that point, and you're going to have to play through those games anyway. So I think certainly the athletic directors are and the presidents are doing the absolute right thing for their institutions. They're not ruling anything out. They'd certainly like to see things stick together, I believe, but they're also, at some point every man for themselves here. And so they're probably having discussions, and they'd be very prudent to have those discussions, because you have to make alternate plans just in case, something happens that triggers the necessity for you to take action.
Bob Thompson, former Fox Sports CEO, president, with us, consultant, has his own company as well, right here on 365 Sports.
Bob, how surprised would you be if the deal is, say, what one of the things has been reported, like majority Apple, like Apple's MLS deal, where there are some sellbacks of over-the-air games to, well, I guess MLS is with Fox, but where Apple controls the inventory and maybe takes it off of the Pac-12 soldiers to sell it, because that would seem to maybe to get that number that they want that would be bigger than the Big 12.
Yeah, that's a concept that's been floating around out there, and it's interesting. I think that would, if it went that way, it probably means that the deal is going to have a heavy tilt towards streaming, because you don't go buy the entire thing to sell off 75% of it or even 50% of it. So, my guess, if that's the way they go, that it's probably going to have a streaming tilt to it, and that's going to upset some people, because it's just, streaming is just not quite at that point from on the sports side of things that it's going to fulfill everybody's, dreams and wishes. The coaches aren't going to be real thrilled about it. I can tell you that right now. Some of the ADs probably won't as well. And there's going to be some fans who'll be upset as well. So, I think technically the streaming portion works. And, I've watched some of the MLS stuff that's been on Apple, and also the games that have been sub-licensed to Fox. And the production is great. The play-by-play and the color's fantastic. So I think, technically it seems to work. No buffering or any problems like that on the Apple TV games. So I think, it's just not quite time to be that heavy on the streaming side, and there will be some pushback if that is in fact the case.
The not time part leads into my question. Where do you think we are, just in general, Bob, with live sports and the timeline, the incorporation of streaming? You hear a lot of people that are pro-streaming saying, like, it's inevitable, that's the direction everything's going, and as you mentioned, sports is just kind of lagging behind a bit, but where are we? Is that something that you think is inevitable, that sports will be just like every other thing and be mostly streaming in 5-10 years? Where do you stand on that?
Well, my thought has been this, and that is, right now the pay TV bundle, cable, satellite, whatever you want to call it, is dropping a couple of points a year. I think it's going to ultimately bottom out in the low 50s, 50 million homes, 55 million homes, and then I think at that point it's going to be fairly stable. Well, that means there's another 65 million homes in the United States that are getting their content basically via streaming services. And by that, I'm talking about the Apple TV Pluses and the Netflixes and the Prime Videos, things like that. I'm not talking about things like Fubo or YouTube TV or Hulu Plus Live TV, because to me, those are just different forms of cable television. They just happen to be delivered, to your house via the internet instead of through a cable. So at that point, then you have to look and say, okay, how much are these streaming services going to have to charge to actually, have a true business? I think you've seen recently that certainly the investment community has started to make expectations of the streaming services such as Disney and some of the others that they need to be, not just thinking about how many subscribers you have, but how are these subscribers going to ultimately create a profit for your business? And so I think that if they really want to get to that, they're going to have to start charging more. And when you start putting together the 3 or 4 or 5 streaming services that you need to have, assuming sports are all over there, you're not far off the cable, the cost of the cable bundle. And at that point, you got to say, wow, I mean, right now, the bulk of the sports is on the cable bundle. So if I'm going to pick one or the other, assuming I can't have all things that have sports, I'm probably going to stay with the bundle because it's certainly easier to navigate through, and the bulk of the sports are still there. And I think, if you look forward at the deals that have been done through 2030, in the case of the NFL, through 2034 or 2033, I think it is, the bulk of the top sports is still going to be on broadcast TV, linear, cable, the typical bundle as it's been known in the past.
I don't know this if I've asked you this before. Or have you ever negotiated with streamers?
No, that the only thing I used to negotiate for was with Major League Baseball on rights for the local teams, so that they couldn't distribute the games in our home territories on MLB.com. But no, the streamers, they didn't really exist back in my day.
I wasn't sure if that was even a part of the conversation.
Lucky you.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I feel privileged for that. I had enough trouble just dealing with FoxSports.com.
Having said that, with the Major League Baseball, what you just said, how concerned should they be about all these regional sports networks, bankruptcy and all what's going on? I know there might be a hearing or a trial around the corner with that.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a mess right now. And I think, opening day is going to prove interesting. I think the Valley Sports Group has a payment due to the Padres like at midnight the day before opening day. So if that's tomorrow at midnight. So, I think baseball's been pretty clear going forward that the games are going to be produced and the games will be distributed. The question is just going to be how. Are they going to be streamed? Are they going to streamed on MLB.com or MLB.TV? Are they going to be distributed via the satellite and cable guys through, say, MLB Extra Innings? A lot of that's left to be determined. But I truly think that Valley's is the intention is they won't come out of this. Otherwise, they'd have filed Chapter 7 as opposed to Chapter 11. And they've made a couple of hires of some folks that certainly wouldn't be getting into this thing if they were just going to try and liquidate it. But it is a complicated process. There's a lot of creditors involved, and it's going to take some time to figure out. But I'm pretty comfortable saying that on Thursday, I think the games are all going to show up. You might have to search for them a little bit, but baseball's prepared to produce them if the others contractual companies don't produce them.
Hey, Bob, always incredible to have you. Your insight, information, experience, and all of that. We appreciate it. Your opinions as well. Love following you on Twitter. We try to bring as many angles and opinions as we can, and yours, of course, was one we were able to tap into a year ago or so, and we appreciate that very much.
My pleasure, guys. Always happy to help.
Bob Thompson, former